Good evening. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome anyone who's here for the first time. My name's Clare, and this is the fourth week of a 4-week block of teachings, and we've been doing this prayer, thought transformation in 8 stanzas, or the 8 verses of thought transformation, or it's got other titles as well, but there's always the 8 verses. So I'll just start with refuge and bodhicitta. Bodhicitta being the wish to become free myself, oneself, to become enlightened, in order that I can then benefit all other sentient beings. And the only being that can really do this is a Buddha, so that we pray, set our minds towards that goal. And think of the qualities of the Buddha of being all full of all positive qualities of love, compassion, kindness and wisdom, and free from all the negativities of attachment, aversion and ignorance. And that's what the words Sangye mean. When we say Sangye in Tibetan is Sang is purified and Ge is full of all qualities, or it might be the other way around, I can't remember, but that's what it means. And this prayer, by the way, if you've got the book, is the very first page if you want to. Yeah. I'll chant it in Tibetan, but it's got the... oh no, sorry, I'll say it in English, but if we're with the lamas, we normally chant it in Tibetan, but we'll say it in English. I go for refuge. Oh, and by the way, I'm not sure if I actually explained this. When the Tibetans pray, they put their thumbs in between their palms. They don't put the palms close together. And this is like you're holding this wish-fulfilling jewel, the jewel of the wish to become enlightened. And it's sometimes described as a ball of light that's sending out light to all beings through this wish. So that's sort of how they put their hands together. But you don't have to. I mean, it's just... I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma and the highest assembly, from the virtuous merit that I collect by practicing giving and the other perfections. May I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, the highest assembly, from the virtuous merit that I collect by practicing giving and the other perfections. May I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma and the highest assembly, from the virtuous merit that I collect by practicing giving and the other perfections. May I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so these if you haven't been in on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, this is there's several more prayers that we chant before teachings. So this is, you just grab one of these on your way in and then you can sort of follow what's going on. And there's absolutely no obligation to do that either. And I was reading this afternoon with the Dalai Lama saying, actually something I watched the other morning. He says every morning he wakes up and he thinks about 2 things, compassion and wisdom. And he thinks about the suffering of the world and how he would like to free all sentient beings, not just humans, but all beings that are sentient, which is right down to the insects and all the animals and all the people that are suffering, which is kind of everybody at different levels. And he just thinks about the suffering and then the wish to free all beings from their suffering. And wisdom is thinking about the nature of reality and how we are, because of our lack of understanding of the nature of reality, we grasp it ourselves as being the most important thing and nobody else, and you know, at the expense of all others. And it's because of this grasping that we suffer. And when you develop the wisdom that understands that we don't exist the way we think we do, then you let go of this grasping. And it's the grasping and the attachment is the root of all of our problems. So when you develop this wisdom of understanding the nature of reality, then you let go of this grasping, and then you are free yourself. You've kind of reached a place of peace and happiness through not sort of chasing after things and pushing other things away and not caring about others. And then you're able to sort of marry that with this compassion and understand that this is what's causing all other beings suffering, and that if they understood that they would be able to free themselves as well. And so then that's why these teachers dedicate their life to teaching, because that's your ticket out. It's the most precious thing you can do. So His Holiness says that's how he starts his day, thinking about these things. And, you know, he sort of talked quite a bit about it, and then he said all religions do this. All religions, not necessarily talking about the nature of reality, but they're all based on love and compassion. All religions. And, you know, all the major religions, maybe there are some crazy cults or something that don't, but might pretend to. They often start with this business of community and love and compassion. But all the major religions, like, you know, the Muslims, the Jews, they're all fighting each other, but the fundamentals of their religions are love and compassion and caring for those less fortunate than yourself. And then it all goes wrong in the hands of demented people. And that's the problem that's going on. It's not the religion itself, because the fundamentals of all religions, all Christianity and Orthodox religions, and who else are the major religions? Hinduism. They're all based on this idea of love and compassion. So His Holiness says, if you follow other religions, and most Westerners or a lot of Australians that come from a Christian background, he says to follow it sincerely. He says, you know, this isn't about wanting you to become Buddhist or anything, it's about trying to teach these notions of love and compassion. And that if you have other religious faiths, to absolutely follow them sincerely, and that will be your, you know, that will bring happiness to you as well, because they're fundamentally similar. So, I'll just read, because it's the last night, I'll read through the whole thing. We'll do the last I'll talk to the last two verses tonight. So the thought transformation in 8 stanzas. And I looked up, just to double check, Geshe Langri Tangpa Dorje Chang, who wrote this, lived in the between 1000 and 1100. So is that the 12th century, the 11th century? 11th century. Anyway, around that time. So it's a very old set of verses that speak to us today, that are deeply meaningful to it now. Because I think the whole thing about this philosophy is that it was searching for some kind of truth. There's no dogma. This is fully open to questioning, and that's what the Buddha did. And the Buddha grew up as a Hindu, and then realised that there was still suffering. He was still suffering. Why was he still suffering? He'd done a lot of practices. I'll quickly run through the story, and this is just my quick sort of memory, that the Buddha was born as a prince. He was born into a royal family and grew up in great privilege and was very protected from the outside world. And then one day when he was a bit older, he left the palace and saw 3 things. There was a sick person, there was an old person, and there was, I think, a body lying in the street, of a dead person. And this kind of rocked him, and he wondered why. So he started really asking questions about, why do people get sick, why do people get old, and why do they have to die, and the amount of suffering involved in these things. And so he was married, and had a baby, and he ended up, because these questions sort of were so deep within him, he realised he couldn't keep living the way he was living with all his privilege, and he wanted to search for some answers. Now, he'd grown up in the Vedic tradition of the Hindu tradition in India, and so he went on and studied, and this is not recommending you leave your family and children. This is not something, it's just something that the Buddha did and would be, and is frowned upon. I know that there are people that have come here and embraced this and thought this is really exciting and it's so wonderful and beautiful, and they leave their career and their source of income and their family, and they go and become a monk or a nun. And I know that one case, I was talking to Geshe about it, thinking, oh, isn't it how amazing this person has done this? And he just went, no, it's not, no, wasn't impressed, because that person did disrobe after not too long. It didn't suit them after all. So we have to be very careful about getting a bit overexcited about this stuff. But the Buddha had, clearly he became the Buddha later on. He knew what he was doing. And after he became enlightened, he came back and taught his wife and his child, and they became enlightened too. So it was about freeing them from their suffering. He was also concerned about his family's suffering. And so he questioned, the Hindu thing didn't quite, it was still a problem for him. So then he went off on his own, and his friends were not very happy. He'd done a lot of those practices of ascetic practices of starving yourself and, standing on one foot or whatever, and worked very, very hard, but was still hadn't found peace, total peace. And what happened was he was actually starving and lying on the side of the road, probably about to die, and a woman came by with some milk and rice, and she fed him, and it revived him, and he realised that how he returned to some kind of clarity in his mind because he had food, and you know what it's like when you're hungry, you can't think straight. And so he realised that that starving, what he'd been doing wasn't the way to sort of figure it out, and that this whole thing of the middle way. Or it's not the whole thing, but that's part of the notion of the middle way, is you actually have to look after yourself physically to live a long and healthy life if you possibly can, and so that you can think about this stuff and work on your own mind and give yourself as much time as possible, and to be physically sort of well is easier on your mind. You're not stressed about your illness or whatever that might have been caused from sort of behaving badly or doing the wrong thing, or not eating properly and drinking too much or smoking too much or something. So you have to sort of look after your body as well. So that was part of what he sort of discovered. And so after that, his friends weren't very happy with him because he'd started eating again and going off and doing his own meditation. And then he did become enlightened. He sat down under the Bodhi tree when he finally sort of realised that he was sort of close and it was making sense. He sat down and had this massive realisation and became completely free of all suffering and completely at peace, and didn't do anything about it at the time, but just sort of went off walking around, and his mates kind of came across him again and realised that he was kind of glowing, that something had happened and that he was really at peace and very happy. And so they then said, I think there were 5 disciples, they sort of said to him, well, teach us what you've learned. And he conveyed that to them. Is that kind of right, Ingrid? It's kind of in the ballpark. So then they became teachers as well. And then that tradition has passed all the way down to Geshe Doga and Geshe Losang and Geshe Jumpa here, that we have here. That's the lineage hasn't been broken. It was broken in the women's lineage. There were women that were first became enlightened as well, but at some point that was broken, and that's why they say the women don't have full ordination now, and His Holiness is, they've been talking about it for years, but as far as they can, you know, like the women can totally become enlightened, but just in terms of this tradition, they don't become fully ordained. They can become ordained, but it's not. I don't really understand, but they're kind of working on it and they talk about it. But I haven't heard anything more about it recently, that women receive full ordination. But there are definitely many women throughout the ages that have become enlightened, and that the teachings are completely equally accessible. So it doesn't really matter. It's not a big issue for me. And you know, if you're a really hardcore feminist, you might sort of worry about it, but it's not an issue for me. This has been completely accessible to me as a lay female. So it's I've seen teachers that have become Geshes, and Geshes is the highest level of study and teaching that you can become, and there are levels within the Geshe, but I've seen women that have become Geshes, done the sort of 10, 20 years of study and are now teaching, and they're really amazing. And the first one, the first woman I saw teaching at that level was kind of mind-blowing. It was really wonderful. And I went to Geshe Doga and said, "Oh my God, you know, women can do this." And he went, "Yeah." He was like, "What do you think?" So it's interesting. Anyway, I digress. And funny with my own sexism, you grow up with this in you as a girl and sort of not, and I actually had my doubts until I met this woman and did teachings with her and was like, "Oh my God, women can do this." And Geshe Doga was like, "Of course they can." You know, it wasn't a question for him, so I found that interesting too. Right, I'll read the verses. We'll get on with it. And then we'll start with a little meditation, sorry, and then we'll read the verse. We might just do some simple breathing before we start. And breathing, it is the simplest. Geshe Doga really talks about it a lot as the most accessible, easiest thing that we can do. And it's not super easy because our mind gets very distracted, and the breath is we sort of forget, and so it's really about bringing your mind inwards and focusing as much as you possibly can, and then noticing when you've drifted and just come back to the breath and following it mentally in and mentally out. And each time you breathe in and out, that's one. So you would count to 3 or 7 or maybe 21. And when you lose count, you come back to 1 again. And you just keep bringing yourself back. So just keeping the spine straight and relax. And letting go of any thoughts, just let them pass. You can come back to it later if something comes up. Just focusing the mind inward. And then just focusing on the in-breath and the out-breath. And imagine your mind as this clear space, like a clear blue sky. And then just focus in on the breath. Okay, just bring your mind back to the room. With practice, everything gets a bit easier. And when we first start this, we do notice that there's a lot going on, but that's actually a good sign, that if you notice how your thoughts are running, and that if you can just remember to just bring yourself back to the focus that you're on the breath, and let go of any thoughts for the moment, and just stay in that focused state. It actually really helps your mind to focus on other things. It strengthens your ability to focus. So I'll read through this and then we'll have a look at verse 7. Being determined to accomplish the highest welfare for all beings who excel the wish-fulfilling gem. Page 68, sorry. No. Being determined to accomplish the highest welfare for all beings who excel the wish-fulfilling gem, I shall constantly hold them dear. When accompanying anyone, I shall view myself as the lowest of all, and in the depths of my heart shall hold dearly others as supreme. Examining my continuum throughout all actions, as soon as an emotional affliction arises that endangers myself and others, I shall face it. By facing it, I shall strictly avert it. When seeing a being of wicked nature who is forced by violent wrongs and sufferings, I shall hold dear this one so hard to find, as though discovering a precious treasure. When others out of jealousy treat me badly with abuse, insults and the like, I shall accept their hard words and offer the other the victory. When someone whom I have assisted and whom I have placed great hope inflicts me with extremely bad harm, I shall view them as my supreme spiritual friend. In short, I shall offer benefit and bliss to all my mothers in this actual life and in the future continuum, and secretly I shall take upon myself all the harms and sufferings of my mothers. Also, having not defiled all these by the stain of the preconceptions of the 8 worldly feelings, and by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, free from attachment, I shall be released from bondage. So in the previous weeks we've talked a lot about anger and attachment and the antidotes to those, patience and what's the antidote to attachment? I suppose it's love. It's actually, attachment is what I can get from something, and love is actually wishing the other to be happy. And the other antidotes of looking at the negative side. With attachment we often exaggerate the qualities of something or someone, and that's setting us up to be let down, because those qualities, it's mostly a projection from our own mind. So when they don't meet those expectations, then we're let down. And anger's pretty obvious how damaging it is. So, and the antidote to that is patience. So we call them the 3 poisons: anger, attachment, and ignorance. Attachment, aversion, and ignorance. So ignorance is addressed in the last 2 lines of this prayer. So all of the first 7 verses talk about what they call conventional bodhicitta, and learning to deal with our emotions on a conventional level. And this final verse is the ultimate level of understanding the nature of reality. So we need to do all of this work before we can actually start to think about, or not to start to think about, but it sets up the groundwork for us to understand why we need to understand the nature of reality. So in the 7th verse, in short, I shall offer benefit and bliss to all my mothers in this actual life and in the future continuum, and secretly I shall take upon myself all the harms and sufferings of my mothers. So this talks to a particular practice, and they call it a secret practice. And when they talk about secret things in Buddhism, it's not that it's secret, it's because it's difficult. So it's you need to sort of build up towards doing them because they're difficult to understand, so you need some background information before you engage in some of these practices. And Tonglen is one of them, and it translates as giving and taking. And it's part of this thought transformation. There are different types of thought transformation, and it's a way of equalising and exchanging yourself with others. It's a way of understanding that other people are suffering from the same afflictions as you and the same attachment and anger, and we all have this, and other people want to be happy the same way as I do. I can't imagine that people wake up in the morning and go, I'm just going to be really make myself as unhappy as I possibly can today. So we all desire happiness, and we don't want suffering. So this is about, these practices are to help us understand that at a deeper level, to develop our compassion for other people. Yeah, so it's in the Tonglen practice, we meditate, and we're not going to do it tonight, because it's just something to think about, and you can read about it in this book on how to meditate, and you can find out about it. But what you basically do is you think about, there are different ways of doing it, but one way that's a kind of short way to do it is to just think about someone that's maybe giving you a hard time, or someone that's, it might be easier to start with someone that you know that is suffering, and you meditate on taking their suffering on. And this is a sort of freaky thing for us to think about at first, but you can't actually exchange yourself for that person. You can't, it's not possible. Their mind is their mind and your mind is your mind. But you think about taking their suffering away from them. You want them to be free from that suffering. And then you think about giving them all of your happiness, all of your virtues, all the good things that you've done. You breathe that out. And you do this with light. You might breathe in all of their suffering in the form of black light, destroy it at your heart, and then breathe out all of the happiness and back to them. And I can remember years ago seeing, I don't know when Oprah stopped being on TV, but I saw her talking to Richard Gere. I'm not sure if you're all aware, but Richard Gere is a practicing Buddhist, very close to the Dalai Lama, and was very close to our teacher who just passed away, one of our teachers, Lama Zopa. And he was on Oprah, and she was talking to him about Buddhism, and he brought up this notion on her TV show of Tonglen, and she was sort of very interested, and he said to her, I'm doing it now. So he'd been sitting in the studio with the big audience of people, and he was practicing Tonglen while he was doing the interview with her. So it's something that you can do if you sort of learn a bit more about it. But that's what this verse is referring to. And it's about lessening our self-importance. And what you do when you meditate on another person, you don't necessarily have to do the Tonglen if you're not comfortable with it. But if you actually really sit and contemplate, say someone who's giving you a hard time, a difficult person at work, or someone that really annoys you, if you sit and you contemplate them and you wish for them to be happy, you wish for them to be free of their suffering. And when you think about being free of their suffering, you wish them to be free of their nastiness. You want them to be free of their unpleasant behaviour and their negativity in their mind, because you know that that's not healthy. We know ourselves it's not healthy for us, so it can't be healthy for them either. And you really sincerely sort of wish for them to be free of that. Or you become aware of what's driving them. But you can't do that unless you actually really think about that person. Mostly we just react. You've just said something incredibly rude or annoying, and I react to that. And so instead of taking it on and taking it personally, you can sort of understand that that person is not in control. And that's actually sad. And you can feel a bit sorry for them and have compassion for them and wish them to be happy, wish them to have all these nice qualities of letting go of their pride, letting go of their jealousy, letting go, and filling their heart with love. And it does not mean that you put yourself in danger. It's not like, I'm just going to let you be abusive or whatever, or be rude, but it softens your heart. You don't have to, you defend yourself as best you can, or you walk away, or you do what you need to do, but you're not getting angry. You're dealing with it, but you're not actually doing it with an angry heart yourself. So there's a difference in the way you deal with it. So these practices, that's actually what it's helping you develop. And that over time, when you think about things this way, you just naturally start to be less reactive yourself. It just naturally starts to happen. But you have to think about it a lot and sort of practice it a lot. Do your daily meditation, and it just softens your mind. And you have a deeper understanding of what's going on. It's usually when we don't know what's happening that we kind of freak out. But when you have an understanding, it's much easier to develop your compassion. And it's much easier to sort of, mostly we're just out for ourselves. And we might not, it's not overt and we're not, but generally we're sort of trying to do the best we can to get on in the world for ourselves. And that can often be at the expense of others, or overlooking others, or stepping over others, or, pushing in traffic, or getting upset when someone pushes in on us in traffic. But these practices help us to actually sort of let go of that, the total concern for myself at the expense of others as well. We really start to sort of see that there's not much difference between them and me. And you can also, there are practices where you think of all beings as your mother. You think about, or, if you've had a difficult time with your mother, you think of someone that you love dearly and that has been very kind to you, and that you will do anything to help them. And you don't want to see them suffering, and you'll do anything that you can to possibly help them. And you will sacrifice things for yourself. And you will actually, maybe undergo some suffering yourself to help this other person that you love so dearly. And we do that. And they say the mother's love is the ideal, that she will do anything to protect her child. So it's that, we're trying to develop that kind of feeling towards all other beings, whether they help us or not, that we would actually put ourselves out to help. So, and it sort of works, every now and then you give it a go and you sort of realise it's actually sort of really can make you feel really good and can help you let go of some of your own selfish self-grasping, and you realise how that's not actually really benefiting you anyway. And we do like to help others. We feel good when we help others. But so the hard part is helping the people that we don't really like. But we need them. Like I said last week, with the person at work that's I'm having difficulty with, I'm learning patience, and I don't think I actually got, and then I needed them to actually, over time, to develop my patience. And that's why in that verse it says they're a precious jewel, precious treasure, because they're more important than anything. Because developing real patience of not getting angry is an amazing gift. And if we can develop, we need these people to develop that. Sorry, I've made notes for myself and I want to follow them because it kind of makes sense if you... Yeah, so this isn't, it's not talking about, I'm so self-cherishing, I'm really terrible, I'm this sort of grasping, self-cherishing person and I should be down on myself. And we do get down on ourselves when we fail at things and what have you. But unless you can actually develop some compassion for yourself and your own failings and give yourself a break and be kind to yourself, you don't know what that feels like. And so by having compassion for yourself, you then are able to develop the compassion for others. So it's not about being down on yourself. And so there's a difference between going around saying, I'm a terrible person because I'm self-grasping and I must do everything for other people. It's not like that. It's more you just really be kind to yourself and develop. There are meditations where you can sort of meditate with yourself in front of you and taking on your own suffering and sending out love and compassion to yourself. So you need to know what that feels like. So you do have to take care of yourself, not just your body, like I was saying before, but take care of your own mind and be gentle on yourself. Because and then you understand what it feels like for other people and how difficult it is for other people. I've been thinking a lot about people at work, and I do sort of, and reading all of this, I'm like, oh my God, I have these tools to understand, and they're just living their lives. They're doing the best they can for themselves, but kind of doing it, it's not helping them. It's not making them happy, and it's hurting a lot of other people. So I sort of realised, wow, this is really, I'm so lucky to kind of know these things that some of these people, oh my goodness. And it's kind of at a distance, if I had to live with them it might be different, but at a distance I can feel compassion. I've written a big note here for myself. Caring for others requires caring for oneself. So the Dalai Lama was talking about Shantideva. He's saying he suggests an interesting way of doing this practice. So visualise your normal self. So just sort of follow with me as I talk about this. Visualise your normal self, the self that is impervious to others' well-being, the embodiment of self-centeredness, often willing to exploit others arrogantly to reach its own ends. Then on the other side, visualise a group of beings who are suffering with no protection and no refuge. You can focus on specific individuals if you wish, or it may be someone you know and care about who's suffering. I don't think it's very difficult to think of beings that are suffering at the moment. Then again, view yourself as a neutral third person, an impartial observer who tries to assess whose interests are more important. Isolating yourself as a neutral observer makes it easier for you to see the limitations of self-centeredness and how much more rational it is to be concerned with the welfare of others. So it's that, and His Holiness often talks about you're just one being and there are all these other suffering beings in the world. Is it just about me? So it's sort of that, he makes it really clear and easy to see that we need to work to help everyone. So that's sort of a rundown on what Tonglen is about. And then in verse 8, the first two lines, also having not defiled all these by the stain of preconceptions of the 8 worldly feelings. Now this comes up quite a lot, the 8 worldly feelings. And so this is how we sort of, in the world, this is what we do. We become elated when someone praises us, or we become depressed when someone criticises or insults or belittles us. We are happy with success and we're depressed with failure. We're joyful with acquiring wealth and dispirited when you become poor, pleased with fame and depressed with the lack of recognition. So we grasp at these 8 worldly feelings. Life is a bit of a roller coaster. So it's important to, when these things happen, not to grasp onto them too much. It's not saying don't have anything, don't be successful. It's not what it's sort of referring to. It's just that if someone praises you, you just get really like, oh, wow, thank you. Oh, I'm so great, thank you. It's more like just accept it with humility. It's not that there's anything wrong with praise as such, but it's sort of just seeking it and grasping at it. Or if someone criticises or insults or belittles you, it's not like, I suppose it's just like, don't take it too personally, or get over yourself, or whatever. Like, we've got such big egos that we can't handle it. That you can, and if someone criticises you and there's some truth in it, then maybe we learn something about ourselves. If someone criticises you and they're just projecting or making stuff up, there's no need to be upset by it or angered by it. It's a cause of compassion for the other person. And generally, it's not nice to criticise other people. Even if there is some truth in it, it's still rude. It's still not nice. So we can just sort of... But the teachings would say, and this is for like really brave people, but they're saying if someone does criticise you or insult you in some way, it's a moment for us to reflect on ourselves and think, well, did I really do that? Or I don't know what the circumstances might be, but you just kind of take a moment and think, maybe there is something in it. So it can be a cause for us to actually benefit from it. So we need to be able to be honest and have the courage to kind of take that on as well. And with success, being happy with success and depressed with failure, I mean, it's the same. Don't get over, ego and pride about things, and if things don't work out, don't get so upset about it, and sort of understand that this happens to everybody, and that it's not the final source, it's not your actual absolute source of happiness. This is not the way to get happy. So maybe you have some success and you run with that, but you're not learning these lessons of having love and compassion and caring about others. And success can actually be a damaging thing to people. It causes more pride and arrogance. So it's not necessarily a good thing. And when things don't work out, that's often when we learn something, or we figure out ways to sort of do it differently, or or just not to stress about it and move on. So either way, failure in ordinary life is not going to change your ability to develop love and compassion, which is what your true happiness is going to come from. So, you meet people that just take things on the chin and they do things really easily and it doesn't really matter to them and they move on. And then there are other people that that can't cope, and it can end very badly. But that's just depending on their own minds and their perspective on a situation. So, all of this up to this point is about this altruistic intention of wishing to free oneself from all of these negativities and be filled with all of the concern and love and compassion and kindness for others. And not as a religious practice that says you must do it. You do it because it makes you happy. And you do it because it's freeing you of ego and jealousy and pride and anger and attachment and stuff. And to be freed of all of these things would be really nice. It would actually feel really good. You spend our days sort of wanting things or not wanting things or getting upset. Imagine if that wasn't happening, if you were just kind of in a spacious, peaceful place where you weren't kind of stressing about stuff all the time. You were just sort of, whatever happens, whatever comes, whatever happens, and that you can find some sense of peace, and it's because you're thinking of others and not the self all of the time, and you're letting go of this sort of self-centred stuff. The last two lines refer to what's called ultimate bodhicitta. So we talk about bodhicitta as the wish to become enlightened in order to benefit all sentient beings. Ultimate bodhicitta is the realisation of the nature of things, the realisation of what they call emptiness in Buddhism. And that's the ultimate mode of existence. And there's a lot of analysis that goes on, a lot of meditations, and we're going to do a meditation on this. And there's many different ways to meditate on it and many different ways of looking at it, and you spend years thinking about it and try to help your mind sort of get around this idea of we're looking at things the wrong way and we're grasping onto things the wrong way. And that's this, with all of these practices, bring us to this ultimate bodhicitta, the realisation of emptiness. And it's lost my train of thought. Sorry. I'll connect the dots again in a minute. But the two have to work together. You need the conventional, you need this altruistic wish to wish to benefit others. And this ultimate nature of understanding the ultimate nature of reality helps us by letting go of our grasping, helps us to actually develop our love and compassion even further. And this, with this understanding combined with our love and compassion, we are then able to be of some use to other beings. But while we're still grasping at the I, we will always fall back into these negative states ourselves, and until we can sort of get some understanding. And they say to have just even a small understanding of this notion is you're on your way. You've let go already by some small understanding. Yeah. Okay, so to first think about emptiness, it's the lack of an independent, self-sufficient self. We look at the self first, and we know just scientifically that we're made up of atoms, molecules, parts, blood, bone, flesh. It came from the sperm and egg. We know that we're changing constantly, physically, and we know that our mind is also changing momentarily. And we know this. But when we think of ourselves as this is Clare. And Clare is very important, and Clare needs to get on in the world and do everything to make Clare happy. And if anything gets in my way, I get very upset. Or, when things come to me, I feel superior. And then when it doesn't work out, I get depressed. And then things might work out again and I get happy again. And there's this roller coaster. And it's me all the time, going up and down and round all the time. And it's because I think that this is an immortal, independently existing. I'm not dependent on anything else. I'm not dependent on any causes and conditions for the things that happen to me in my life. I just am. And I must have the things I want and be free of suffering. But why do I keep suffering? Why am I, I want to be happy, but I keep finding suffering. And it's because I'm grasping onto this so tightly that it will always let me down. And my mind, I think of Clare, as a certain, I have this image of myself. But as I've said in previous weeks, I used to be very angry. When I was younger, I was a very angry person. So am I angry, Clare? Or am I the Clare that has moments of peace and happiness? Is that Clare? Or am I Clare that's trying to keep this all straight in my head at the moment so I can talk about it? Someone's pointing at me on that one. And when we're meditating, am I just that trying to focus inward, and when I lose focus, is it unfocused Clare? Which moment of mind is Clare? And which physical moment, as I, getting some arthritis, is it the aching Clare, or is it the Clare that used to, that could run around and swim a lot and do things? And as you get older, it gets harder. Which one am I? And as I get older, it will get, even harder. So it's thinking about things like that. When we search for where does this inherently, independently existing Clare exist, and everything that's ever happened to me in my life, all of my family, every person I've ever known, all the people I know now, it's, the lamas, all of that is having an impact on my life. Everything that has ever happened to me has caused me to think certain ways or do certain things. And when you think your mind first, then your body follows. You think about things and then you do them. It's all about your mind. So everything that's ever had any impact on my mind, the education, the schools I went to, the teachers, the people, everything that's ever happened to you has an impact on who you are now. And what's happening now is going to impact the next moments of your life and your future. So by analysing this, we sort of realise, where is this independently existing person? We think that we exist solidly and independently and substantially without any causes and conditions. And my name is Clare, but when I was born, they didn't go, oh, there's Clare. So that came later. They put the name onto this bunch of stuff and a mind. So I don't, I could go and change my name by default and be something else. But there's a label on me at the moment. I'm known as Clare. And you talk about Clare and you'll have an image. You know who that is. And it's the same way with anything. And we often use the table as the example. We put the label table onto this bunch of stuff. But this design, someone thought up the design, maybe discussed what do we need. We need a bench, we need a top. It's been planed. Someone thought about all of it. Someone thought about the colours. Buddhism often has red. So they got the paint, and someone went and bought all the nails, and they had to source the wood. So someone had to source the wood, and the wood came from Bunnings or something, and then Bunnings got it from the timber people that chopped down trees, that sort of sourced it. So, and then the tree grew from a seed. And that seed came from another tree somewhere that grew from a seed, that came from another tree that grew from a seed. It regresses infinitely. That all of this at the moment has come together. And I think Damien built these. So Damien's part of this. He hammered it together. And we call it a table. We all agree on that. It's a conventional term that we all agree on. But there are things, and I often think of the, there was a film years ago where in Africa, The Gods Must Be Crazy, where they dropped a Coke bottle out of a plane, and that this tribe of people found this thing and created a religion around this Coke bottle. They worshipped the Coke bottle because it had fallen out of the sky. They didn't call it a Coke bottle, or they didn't call it a bottle or anything. They might not have seen glass ever. So it had a different, they didn't know that. We call it a bottle, but they called it something else. So we label things. And so everything exists, really, they say, actually only in name. If I pull all this wood apart, knock it apart, lay it all on the floor, there's a pile of wood, you can no longer call it a table. It's labelled as a pile of wood. So that's what we have to think about. And the way you start this is you actually search for the thing you're looking for. And it's actually very hard to pinpoint. But we will do this practice now. It's gone after 8, and we'll have a little meditation on this. I'm sorry, anyone who needs to leave, it's fine. So again, just get yourself comfortable and relax. Bring your mind inwards. Just focusing inwards. So emptiness sounds pretty abstract, but in fact it's very practical and relevant to our lives. The first step toward understanding it is to try to get an idea of what it is that we think exists, to locate, for example, the I that we believe in so strongly, and then by using clear reasoning in analytical meditation to see that it is a mere fabrication, something that has never existed and could never exist in the first place. But don't throw out too much, you definitely exist. There is a conventional interdependent self that experiences happiness and suffering, that works, studies, eats, sleeps, meditates, and becomes enlightened. The first most difficult task is to distinguish between the valid I and the fabricated one. Usually we cannot tell them apart. In the concentration of meditation, it is possible to see the difference, to recognise the illusory I, and eradicate our long habituated belief in it. The meditation here is a practical first step in that direction. So just relax and calm your mind. Motivate strongly to do this meditation in order to finally become enlightened for the sake of all beings. Now, with the alertness of a spy, slowly and carefully become aware of the I. Who or what is it that thinks, feels, and meditates? How does it appear to you? Is your I a creation of your mind, or is it something that exists concretely and independently in its own right? Now we try to locate it. Where is this I? Is it in your head? In your eyes? In your heart? In your hands? In your stomach? In your feet? Carefully consider each part of your body, including the organs, the blood vessels, and nerves. Can you find your I? It might be very small and subtle, so consider the cells, the atoms, the subatomic particles. If you think that your I is part of the body, then what would happen if that part were removed in an operation or damaged in an accident? And what happens to the I when your body ceases to function at death? Perhaps you think your mind is the I. The mind is constantly changing, a constantly changing stream of thoughts, feelings, and other experiences coming and going in rapid succession. It's never the same from one moment to the next. Which of these experiences is the I? Is it a loving thought, an angry thought, a happy feeling, a depressed feeling? If you think that your I is one of these experiences, then what happens to it when that kind of experience is not present in your mind? If your I is love, for example, then when your mind is filled only with anger, does the I go somewhere else or disappear altogether? Is there no I at that time? Or maybe you have many I's, the angry one, the loving one, and the frightened one, etc. If you cannot find the I in your body or your mind, then could it be something else? Is there some extra part of you other than your body and mind? After all, we say my body and my mind, implying the existence of something else that owns these two. If so, what is it? Where is it found? What kind of phenomena is it? Examine every possibility you can think of. Again, look at the way your I actually appears, how it feels to you. After this search for the I, do you notice any change? Do you still believe that it is as solid and real as you felt before? Does it still appear to exist independently in and of itself? Next, mentally disintegrate your body. Imagine all the atoms separating and floating apart. Billions and billions of minute particles scattered throughout space. Imagine that you can actually see this. Now disintegrate your mind. Let every thought, feeling, sensation, and perception float away. Then check your feeling of I. Where is it? What is it? Don't make the mistake of thinking my body is not the I and my mind is not the I, therefore I don't exist. You do exist, but not in the way you instinctively feel, as something independent and inherent. Conventionally, yourself exists in dependence upon mind and body. And this combination is the basis to which conceptual thinking ascribes the name I, or self, or Mary, or Harold. This is the you that is sitting and meditating and wondering, do I exist? Whatever exists is necessarily dependent upon causes and conditions, or parts and names for its existence. A car, for example, is a collection of pieces of steel, glass, plastic, rubber, an engine, etc., put together by people in a factory. We give the name car to this collection, but if we look for the real, concrete, independently existing car, it cannot be found. So conventionally, things exist dependently, and understanding dependence is the principal cause for understanding their ultimate nature, emptiness. The conventional nature of an object is its dependence upon other things, and its ultimate nature is its emptiness of inherent, independent existence. Think about how your body exists conventionally in dependence upon skin, blood, bones, legs, arms, organs, and so forth. In turn, each of these exists in dependence upon their own parts, cells, atoms, and subatomic particles. Think about your mind, how it exists in dependence upon thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and sensations, and how, in turn, each of these exists in dependence upon the previous conscious experiences that gave rise to it. Now go back to your feelings of self or I. Think about how you exist conventionally in dependence upon mind and body and name, the self's parts. When the body feels hungry or cold, for example, you think, I am hungry, I am cold. When the mind has an idea about something, you say, I think. When you feel love for someone, you say, I love you. When introducing yourself, you say, I am so-and-so. Apart from this sense of I that depends upon the ever-flowing, ever-changing streams of body and mind, is there an I that is solid, unchanging, and independent? The mere absence of such an inherently existing I is the emptiness of self. The emptiness of the self. So we finish the session with a conclusion as to how your self exists. Conclude that by dedicating sincerely any positive energy and insight you have gained to the enlightenment of all beings, think that this meditation is just one step along the path to finally achieving direct insight into emptiness, and thus cutting the root of suffering and dissatisfaction. Okay. So we'll finish up, but this meditation actually helps with empathy. By sort of understanding this, you gradually develop less self-grasping, which then opens your heart to others, to understanding and seeing others, and not you sort of realise that it's I think it's just by lessening your self-grasping and attachment to this, and realising that you're attached to something that doesn't actually exist in the way that you think it exists, you then actually, it follows that you're less concerned about getting things for this self or being angry. Does that make sense? There is this less, and by actually lessening your self-grasping, you are opening your hearts to others, and then you move into the Tonglen practice, and I think it makes Tonglen more powerful. So that's why Tonglen is difficult, because it's harder to do if we're overly concerned about ourselves. It's harder to sort of wish to give all of your happiness to others and to take on their suffering. So, thank you all. I've kept you late again, and there's tea and cake in the dining room. Sorry, I didn't open it up to questions. Again, if anyone's actually got anything they'd like to ask me. Next week is who, do you think? Do you remember? No, sorry, I didn't look into it. There'll be someone different next week, and they're all good. You came. Next week's a public holiday. Oh, we still do it we're still here on public holidays. Yeah, great, thank you.